So the other half of the equation for today's presentation is working with files, collaborating with files with others. And I want to give a general understanding first of where are these files stored, but then get into the real value of what is it like to work with files inside of Microsoft Teams. On this slide, you see that there are a number of products called out: OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. And it really is the blend of all three that are giving you this great experience. A lot of what I'll show you is working with files in Teams, but is really a pervasive experience that you get all the same capabilities of working with files throughout Microsoft 365. A lot of the value of how you work and share on files comes from the OneDrive innovation that now is baked into Teams and SharePoint, and vice versa. There's the scale, security, and compliance that you get from SharePoint. That's a trusted entity, a source. All of it is a part of Microsoft 365, so all of it is secure, compliant, and private. But the real value is when you start working with others. And a lot of times that will be with inside Microsoft Teams. You create a team, you create a channel, and you start working on files and having conversations. And then, of course, the value is real-time co-authoring, ease of sharing, taking that content with you if you ever go offline, and the value of being able to do that all with inside Teams with your team members without having to feel like you're duplicating, replicating, or switching context. That's the value of working with files in Microsoft Teams. Getting down to some of the nuts and bolts, and you can get a little skip ahead visually before I show you the demo, is within Teams you can manage all of your files across your various teams. You can create subfolders, however it is that you want to organize your content. You can create new content inside of Microsoft Teams. We have a consistent sharing experience, no matter whether you're sharing through an email, whether you're sharing directly in SharePoint, or what I'll show you when you start to share in Teams, it's from a chat perspective. It's easy to share, and it has that same way of sharing. You can share as a link, or you can make a file a tab. I'll show you that in demo. And you'll have these same capabilities whether you think in terms of engaging through Microsoft Teams on the web, on the mobile client, or even on the desktop. So without further ado, I think you should see what it's like to work with files in Microsoft Teams. So again, to orient you, I'm in that same general channel of the freelance team, but this time I want to show you not just how you can work with lists inside of Teams, but the files side of it. By default, whenever you create a new team, you always, for the general channel or any channel that you create, you'll get this tab, which is the Files tab. And this is now leveraging a lot of the value that we've had for years in SharePoint, but bringing the experience directly inside of Teams so you can better manage your files. One way to see how this actually meets and is also akin to the value of lists is there is a list component to every document library. So as you go to the Files tab, you'll see some of the same value I showed you for lists plays into how you manage content. You can create choice fields or a status column. You can, of course, have owners. You can create to track how much effort it might be to create or finish this content. So that value of how lists and files come together is they're really built on the same platform for how you track and manage information. In this respect, the information is a document. So what I want to show you is some of the value of when you're working with documents. You can easily make them more visible. So I'm going to show you one thing where I can pin this to the top. So this is the Contoso Loyalty Program PowerPoint. Now it appears at the top of the Files tab alongside two other pieces of content. The other thing that I can do is if I really want to more prominently display this for my team, is I can take that PowerPoint and it doesn't move it, but I can make it as a tab of its own so that when I do that, it's going to now be up here and be a unique tab called Contoso Loyalty Program. And I think that's a little bit too long, so I can always rename it. I'm not renaming the file, I'm just renaming the tab. And I'll show you one of my favorite things is you can actually always go into Windows, and I like to use the handshake for the loyalty program. You can even use emojis so that you can make your tabs appear how you want them to from a naming perspective. But then the real value is that your document and how you work with other people is now working on the PowerPoint using PowerPoint for the web. And there's a lot of things you can do, of course, to manage and work on your slides and comment and share. There's a lot of things that you can do with your content. So let's look what it's like to actually start a conversation around a file. If I go in and I choose from recent, there's the loyalty program PowerPoint, and I'm going to share it as a link. What I really want to show you is when you're sharing it, by default, every member of the team has the same level of access, but you might be working with content that has different permissions than the team, or you want to adjust it for this particular share. You can go in and you can always just share with everybody as is. You can choose only this team. If ever anybody were to grab this link and share it with somebody else, it will only work for the freelance team, or you can more specifically choose. And really what I'm sharing here is when you go to share a piece of content, it is now the same if you've used the sharing mechanism in OneDrive, in SharePoint, or now in Teams. You have the same sharing experience, of course, here in Teams. And if I wanted to, just for this particular conversation, only allow people to click in to view the content but not edit it, in that instance when they open it, and here's what it looks like after I send it down. Now that the file's been shared in the thread, anybody that has access to it will be able to click into it, and similar how it was a tab in Teams, it's now also just a file that I can work at in its full fidelity, as large as possible, but I'm still inside Microsoft Teams. So that's a couple ways where it's easy to share an asset, and I'm going to go in and just show you a few more things of working with files in Teams from a column and metadata perspective. I showed you before with lists how I can go in and adjust based on grouping. This time I want to show you all things that are within a draft. So if I want to filter down by draft, I can apply that. And now it just minimizes down based on that metadata that's been listed as draft, just those 4 items that maybe need to call to my attention where I need to go work on them. And I know I'm working with Alan. I can go and learn a little bit more about Alan before I start to work with him, or I can jump right into the content and start working with it. Whether it's a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, a PowerPoint, there's a lot of ways you can then use the metadata to help you transition through. And it even identifies some of the things that are missing. So if there's required information or you own building that in, we want to call that attention. Here you see it in the owner that the owner isn't listed, but I could also see that here amongst the whole list. And so that's a great way to see how metadata comes through so that you can work with your assets. I want to take off this filter and go back to the full list and show you one other thing that's the value when you start to actually look across a lot of different content types. You'll see that we have previews not only for what appears at the top, but you can actually scroll through and get a visual orientation around what this different content is. And you can see a lot of different content types. There's Adobe Illustrator files, there's image files, there's movie files, there's even 3-dimensional files, all of which we support 320 plus file types so that you can visually see all the content that you're working with. And again, if you're working it as a list, you can see that you've got some content pinned to the top and a real quick view to scroll through your content and start working with it. Another, of course, important area when you're working with files in Microsoft Teams or just working with your team is the ability to create new files. And you'll see that we have, similar to if you've used SharePoint in a document library, you really are doing the same thing here. I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a new Word document. And out of the box, you can see I can create a lot of different types of content. But to create, when I'm already in the team, I'm going to just give this a new assignment and then click Create. And it's going to automatically start to create both an instance of Word for Web to give me a great end user experience to create the content, but it's also now being stored in SharePoint. And I'll just do a quick hi, because this is just a simple demo to show you that if I close this out and I go back to my list of files and I go back to just my modified newer to older, you'll see here new assignment document now created by Megan, who I'm demoing by. And that's an easy way to create content that's already in the right place. My team members already have access to it. And if they come back, or I wanted to start to have a chat, to share it, to get their input, it's right here with my team, right? Being able to then co-author with me, to be able to share with other people. And of course, if I want to take this content with me, I can sync it, which is the last thing I want to show you, how to take all this content with you offline. This leverages OneDrive Sync to take your content offline so that you can work with it even when you don't have internet connectivity or you're just in a remote location that has a low latency connection. Choose the sync. It'll be able to give you access to all these files, and if there were subfolders, the subfolders as well. And now I can work at that offline, or anytime where I'm back online, all of my changes will sync back to the back end, and be available here for other people, even if they've also been working on that same file. They will all sync back and we'll have the latest information once we're reconnected.